As a follow-up to my Bill Russell video a few days ago, I am going to do another Bill Russell video, this one more diving into the stats and facts and records that the great man holds. Of course, Bill Russell, having played from 1956-57 through to the end of 1968-69, having played 13 seasons with the Boston Celtics, 15.1 points per game, 22.5 rebounds per game, 4.3 assists per game. Scoring peaked out at 18.9 points per game. Rebounding peaked out at 24.7 points per game. Had 3 seasons of 24 points or of 24 rebounds or more. Had 2 seasons of 18 points or more. And assists peaked out at 5.8. Had 2 seasons of 5 assists or more. Career shooting of 44%. Now, in relevance to his time, he was 2.6% above league average for his time. Peaked out at 46.7 field goal percentage. Had 4 seasons over 45% field goal percentage. Free throws peaked out at 61.2%. Career average of 56.1. Had 2 seasons of 60% or more. And played no less than 35 minutes a game throughout his entire career. Peaked out at 45.2 minutes, had 10 of 13 seasons over 40 minutes a game for a career average of 42.3 in the regular season. Now, as we move to the playoffs, his per-game playoffs, well, you would expect them to stand out, and they do. Average 16.2 points, 24.9 rebounds, and 4.7 assists in the playoffs. Career peak playoff average for points, 22.4. Had 2 playoff runs of over 20 points per game. Peak rebounding, 29.9 rebounds per game. That is unbelievable. Let's have a count here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 playoff runs, all of 10 games or more, and all of 25 or more rebounds per game. Never averaged less than 20 rebounds a game in a playoff run. Peaked out at 6.3 assists, and had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 playoff runs of 5 assists or more. 45.4 minutes per game average for the playoffs. In all of his playoff runs, he averaged all but one of his playoff runs averaged more than 40 minutes a game. Peaked out at 48 minutes a game, and that was in 1962. He literally played pretty much every minute of every playoff game in 1962. Peaked out, obviously, at 48 a game, and had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 playoff runs of 45 minutes per game or more. Career playoff shooting percentage of 43%. That peaked out at 52.7. That was for 1965. And all but 5 playoff runs of 45% shooting or more. Russell's resume reads pretty astoundingly, really. An 11-time NBA champ, 1957, missed in 1958, then won 8 straight from 1959 to 1966. Missed in 1967, then back-to-back as a player-coach in 1968-69. He was a 5-time MVP winner, 1958, 3 straight from 61 to 63, and again in 1965. 12-time All-Star, all but his rookie season. Won the All-Star Game MVP in 1963. 3 All-NBA first-team selections in 1959, 1963, and 1965. So 2 of his 3 seasons as the All-NBA first-team center coming as the MVP of the league. 8 All-NBA second-team selections, 1958, 1963 to 62, 1964, and again 1966 through to 1968. Only the 1 season available for all defensive teams, and he made the all-defensive first team. That's his final season, aged 35, in 1969. He led the league in rebounding 4 times, the rebounding champ of the league, in 1958, 59, 64, and 65. He made the NBA's 25th, 35th, and 50th anniversary teams, and his number 6 is retired by the Boston Celtics. Now let's just go on to a few different factoids for Mr. Bill Russell. In 13 seasons, he went to the playoffs 13 times, went to the NBA Finals 12 times, and won 11 NBA championships. 11 for 12 in the NBA Finals, and 12 of 13 in finals appearances to playoff appearances. It's a pretty good record. Has 8 consecutive championships. No one in NBA history has come close to leading that many championships, let alone winning that many in a row. Of course, the Minneapolis Lakers of 52 to 54 three-peated. The Chicago Bulls three-peated twice, 91 to 3 and 96 to 8. And then the LA Lakers from 2000 to 2002. Russell won 8 of them, 1959 to 1966. 12 times Bill Russell led the number 1 rated defence in the league in the Celtics. So 12 of his 13 seasons, they were the best defence in the league. The year before his debut, they were rated 6th out of 8 teams. The only time he was not the number 1 rated defence was in 1968. Wilt Chamberlain's Philadelphia 76ers, the number 1 rated defence that season. And the year after his retirement, Boston slipped down to 8 out of 14 as far as defensive rated teams. He finished top 5 in MVP voting 11 of his 13 seasons. Only 2 times he did not finish top 5 in MVP voting were his rookie season, where he finished 7th, and I believe it was 1968, where MVP voting was incomplete. He had 12 top 10 MVP finishes, 12 of his 13 seasons. He was a top 10 player in the league minimum, and considering 1968, it is unaccounted for. 5 MVPs, runner-up twice in MVP voting, which is an unbelievable feat when you consider the fact that he was top 5 in MVP 11 times. He was top 3 in MVP finishes 9 times. So 7 out of 9 times he was a top 2 player in the league, and 5 of those times he won it. And again, only missed out on MVP voting in 1968 due to it being incomplete. Bill Russell faced and defeated Bob Pettit, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Nate Thurmond in the NBA Finals. Nate Thurmond, one of the most underrated defensive centers in league history, a top 5, top 10 defensive center, that's for sure. And defeated the likes, on top of those guys, of Dolph Schayes and Oscar Robertson in the playoffs. A massive playoff resume and finals resume there. I mean, you have to have Wilt Chamberlain in your top 5 all time. You have to have Jerry West close to your top 10. Bob Pettit and Elgin Baylor in your top 15, top 20. Nate Thurmond, if he's not in your 50, again, he's a top 10 defensive player all time. Dolph Schayes, to me, he's a top 50 player all time. Made all NBA selections next to both George Mikan and Bob Pettit. And Oscar Robertson, I mean, the resume speaks for itself. He actually had a greater percentile increase in production against Wilt than Wilt did against Russell on a percentile basis. Bill Russell outplayed Wilt Chamberlain. His points increased by a greater percentage. His rebounding increased. His passing increased greater than Wilt's did. Now, obviously, Wilt had greater numbers, but as far as raising their game against one another on a percentile basis, Bill Russell had Wilt Chamberlain covered. As is known, Bill Russell never lost a Game 7, and in series-closing games, and I do believe this is for his whole basketball career, but in series-closing games, 27-2. Those are 2 losses coming at the hands of Bob Pettit when a cracked ankle by Bill Russell cost the team. He only played through to the middle of Game 3 of the 1959 finals and limited minutes in Game 6, where Bob Pettit scored 50, and of course going down to Wilt Chamberlain in 1967. He has the second most rebounds in NBA history and one of 2 players to have 20,000 rebounds. He's the only player in NBA history to finish top 5 in MVP voting without averaging 10 points per game. He averaged 9.9 points per game and finished 5th in MVP voting. The only player to come close was Ben Wallace in 2003-04, averaging 9.5 points per game. He finished 7th. He is only one of 3 players to ever win 5 league MVPs, alongside of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with 6 and Michael Jordan tied with 5. He is also one of 3 players to win 3 consecutive MVP awards. He was the first player to do and accomplish this feat between 1961 and 63. Wilt Chamberlain, the next player, between 66, 67 and 68. And Larry Bird between 1984, 85 and 86. He had 10 straight seasons of 20 rebounds per game or more. In series closing games, as I mentioned before, 27-2 for the record, averaged 16.6 points, 27.5 rebounds, 4.6 assists, or around at 17, 28 and 5. He had 1 All-Star MVP from 12 All-Star games, as mentioned before, 3 All-NBA first teams, 8 second teams, 1 defensive first team. He led the league in total games once. He led the league in rebounds 4 times. 4 times he finished top 10 in total assists, finishing top 5 twice in assists around the league. And despite the criticism he gets for his inefficiency on offense, he was top 5 in field goal percentage 4 times, finishing top 3 twice and runner-up once. He led the league in total minutes once, led the league in rebounds per game 5 times, top 10 league leaders in assists per game 4 times, was 8 times he was in the top 10 for PER, 12 times he led the league in defensive win shares. Played 13 seasons, 12 times he led the league in defensive win shares. 32 players in league history at the time of writing this article had more win shares than Russell had total defensive win shares. That's right. Russell's total defensive win shares is 133.6. Eclipsed all but 32 players for career win shares. That should be just a quick little caveat for people there. On official career triple doubles, he has 14. That's greater than the likes of Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Moses Malone, Karl Malone, Bob Pettit, Dirk Nowitzki, Patrick Ewing, Bob McAdoo, Elvin Hayes, Jerry Lucas, Willis Reed and Dave Cowens. Obviously, for Neil Johnston and George Mikan, they're unavailable. Players such as Wilt with 78, Kareem 17, Hakeem with 15, KG with 19, David Robinson with 15, and Charles Barkley with 24 had more. To give you an idea of his win share capacity on the defensive end, 133.64. His next closest rival being Tim Duncan at 106.34. Of course, Duncan having well and truly more games, I believe 460 somewhat games more played than Bill Russell. Just to give you an idea that if Bill Russell had retired at the end of 1966, he still would have had more career win shares defensively than Tim Duncan, having played close to 600 less games. Even more of an idea, his defensive win shares alone put him ahead of the career win share leaders at the time of writing this article: Willis Reed, Isaiah Thomas, Nate Archibald, Dave Cowens, George Gervin, Bob McAdoo, Bob Cousy, Neil Johnston, Rick Barry, Jerry Lucas, Allen Iverson, Julius Erving, George Mikan, Walt Frazier, Dominic Wilkins, Dwayne Wade, Elvin Hayes, Scottie Pippen, Patrick Ewing, Steve Nash, and at the time, Kevin Durant. His 163.52 total win shares for his career are the 18th most in league history, and more than 33 others in my top 3 list, including Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Hakeem Olajuwon, and the 11th most ever among centres and power forwards. He had 4, Ben Wallace at 6'9" won 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards. 4. You can make a case that Ben Wallace probably could have won 5 in a row, or you can make the case he probably shouldn't have 4. But to give you an idea, if Ben Wallace at 6'9" won 4, imagine how many Bill Russell would have won at approximately the same height, as a far better athlete and a far higher basketball IQ. And I would go as far to say that Bill Russell was a better offensive player than Ben Wallace. Boston won 716 of a possible 1,025 regular season games during Bill Russell's career. That is a win percentage of 69.9%. He led his team in win shares for 10 consecutive seasons. That's correct. Bill Russell, the guy who just had a lot of help, led the team in win shares 10 straight seasons. For even more of an impact on his win shares, which is an advanced stat that a lot of people like to use, he has 17.7 more win shares than Larry Bird, despite the fact that he played 66 more games than Larry Bird. But to give you some perspective, Bird's best win share season was 15.8, an 82-game season, meaning that had Bird played more games, he still wouldn't have caught Bill Russell. For those of you that are debating, I think that really does help close the case on Russell if the championships and the MVPs didn't, as Russell is the greatest Celtic ever. He anchored his team to the lowest points per game allowed in the league 4 times, and 5 times they were runner-up to the lowest points per game allowed in the league. In 11 straight seasons, he led the league in defensive win shares. The next closest by anyone ever is tied for George Mikan and Tim Duncan, who did it 5 each. 5 times each they led the league in defensive win shares. Well, Russell did 11. Now, everyone understands how great a player Tim Duncan was. That should really give you some perspective on just how great a defender Bill Russell was. He was the first player in league history to average 20 rebounds per season. His game high of rebounds, 51. Second to Wilt Chamberlain, who had 55, ironically, on Bill Russell. He has the record for most rebounds in a half at 32. Again, 21,620 career rebounds, has him second all-time. Again, only the second player to grab 20,000 rebounds. He has the most rebounds in playoff history, a staggering 4,104 rebounds in the playoffs. He has the highest rebound per game for a career in the playoffs, 24.9. On 3 occasions, he grabbed 40 or more rebounds in a playoff game, twice in the finals. Never averaged less than 20 rebounds in a playoff campaign. He has the highest rebound per game average in NBA Finals history, 29.5 rebounds a game. His 22.9 rebounds per game in the 1957 Finals is the highest by any rookie ever. 40 rebounds in the NBA Finals game, coming in what I deem to be the greatest Game 7 in league history. 30 points, 40 rebounds in the 1962 NBA Finals against Elgin Baylor and Jerry West. He has the most rebounds in the quarter of an NBA Finals game with 19. He had 15 consecutive 20-rebound NBA Final games. Yes, that's right. 15 consecutive Finals games of 20 rebounds. He has 12 consecutive seasons of 1,000 rebounds. He's 11-0 in series-deciding games, whether that be Game 3s, Game 5s, or Game 7s. 10 of those, Game 7s. 18, his rebound per game average in series-deciding games. 29.5. His rebound per game average in series... 18, his point per game average in series-deciding games. 29.5, his rebounds per game in series-deciding games. As declared by the Professional Basketball Writers Association in 1980, he was deemed to be the greatest player ever. That was the same season Kareem won his 6th MVP. I just hope that gives some perspective to just how highly he is held in the history and the annals of the game. Again, elected to the 25th, 35th and 50th anniversary NBA teams. He holds the record for the most rebounds in a 4-game final series, a 5-game final series, and a 7-game final series. 118 rebounds in 4 games, 144 rebounds in 5 games, and a massive 189 rebounds in a 7-game series. His 1,718 rebounds are the most for a career in the NBA Finals. The next closest to that is Wilt Chamberlain at 862, and at the time of writing, LeBron James was the active leader at 490. That is not including the 2020 NBA Finals. His 8.1 blocks per game average comes from a database of 135 games where blocks were recorded by TV, radio, or newspaper. Yes, that's right, of 135 game sample, 8.1 blocks per game. Phil Jackson is quoted, "In my estimation, the guy has to be there as Bill Russell, who won 11 championships as a player. I think the idea of what excellence is when you win championships." Just an idea of who Phil Jackson is likely to take to start the franchise. Bill Russell is believed to have averaged a triple-double unofficially in the 1968 NBA Finals. That triple-double would read at 17.3 points per game, 21.8 rebounds per game, 5.7 assists per game, and 10 blocks per game. The 1968 NBA Finals. Something tells me the man probably would have won the Finals MVP. 24 teams have fewer total rebounds in the NBA Finals through history than Bill Russell. They are the Clippers, the Hornets, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Raptors, the Grizzlies, and the Pacers. Now, obviously those first teams before the Pacers at this point hadn't been to the NBA Finals, but with the Raptors now having gone to the NBA Finals, they will have a tally. The Pacers have 247 rebounds as a franchise in the Finals. The Magic at 375, the Nets at 411, the Jazz at 473, the Suns at 514, the Kings, back when they were the Royals, 363, the Mavericks at 477, the Bucks at 524, the Blazers at 773, the Thunder at 991, the Wizards at 938, the Hawks at 1480, the Cavaliers at 1160, the Rockets at 982, the Heat at 1134, but that will obviously be greater as the time of writing this article was before the 2020 Finals. 1427 to the Spurs, and the Bulls at 1393. Bill Russell has more rebounds in the Finals than those 24 teams do in the Finals. A comparative defensive impact for both Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt led teams in defensive rating versus Russell. Second, third, fifth, second, third, fifth, second, third, first, and eighth. Wilt led teams in opposing points per game. versus Russell, and this is obviously over the 10 years their careers overlapped. 4th, 5th, 9th, 9th, 1st, 7th and 8th, 3rd, 3rd, 4th and 4th. Russell's teams against Wilt defensive rating, 9 out of 10 times they were the first team, the number one rated defence, obviously other than 68. Russell's led teams in opposing points per game, 5th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 2nd, 1st, 1st, 1st and 2nd. And 2nd again. 43 Hall of Fame players faced Bill Russell. Bill Russell faced 43 Hall of Fame players. The Celtics' record when Russell scored 20 points on 50% shooting, a massive 82-28. Now, of the 1,425 teams, again at the writing of this article, I do believe this was at the end of the 2018 season, of the 1,425 teams to play since the shot clock at this point, Russell had led the top 8 lowest defensive rating teams, with 7 of those teams leading the league in pace. Their pace was never lower than 118, and their defensive rating was never higher than 85.1. Boston also has 9 of the top 12, 10 of the top 17, 11 of the top 25, and 12 of the top 47 defensive rated teams in shot clock history. All of those under Bill Russell. In Russell's 12 of his 13 seasons, the Celtics led the league in defensive rating. Russell's all-time record for defensive win shares is obviously 133.64. The next closest is Tim Duncan at 106.34 in 1,392 games. That's 27.3 less defensive win shares for Duncan, despite the fact that he played 429 more games. The fastest 2 teams in NBA history were the 1960 Celtics at a pace of 136.3, and the 1961 Celtics were the second fastest at 134.4. Now, to give you an idea, they both led the league in defensive rating. The Celtics under Bill Russell led the league in opposing points per game 4 times, finished second on 5 occasions, and finished third once. The other 3 times, again, saw them finish 5th, 5th and 6th. Russell's finishes in defensive rating league-wide finished top 3 in every season, top 2 in top 2 in all but one season, and led the league in defensive rating himself in 11 of 13 seasons. No coincidence, they won 11 championships. To give you an idea of just how great a defender he was, here were his margins of victory in the years he led the league in defensive win shares. 2.7 win shares clear in 58, 2.8 clear in 59, 0.9 clear in 60, 4.8 clear in 61, 5.6 in 62, 6.8 in 63, 5.4 in 64, a stupid 8.2 defensive win shares ahead of the next guy in 65, 2.9 in 66, 2.2 in 67, and 2.9 in 69 at the age of 35. Going back to 1965 with a margin of 8.2, Russell's margin of victory of defense over the league in defensive win shares was equal to his total defensive win shares in 1959. This would have tied for 16th alone as the greatest defensive win season ever by an individual, tied with, obviously, Russell himself in 59 and Elvin Hayes in 1975. If Bill Russell had retired at the end of the 1966 NBA season, after completing his 8-peat and winning a 9th championship, he would still have more defensive win shares than Tim Duncan, as I mentioned earlier. Russell would have had 106.74 defensive win shares compared to Duncan's 106.34. To compare this, Bill Russell would have only played 727 games, which would have been at the time 665 less than Tim Duncan. That's an entire career almost, by comparison for Russell, less games than Tim Duncan, and still would have led him in defensive win shares. Bill Russell led the NBA in defensive win shares 11 of his 13 seasons. He has the top 6 defensive win shares seasons ever and 7 of the top 10. He's the only player to ever have more than 11 defensive win shares in a season, which he did 6 times. He also has 6 of the 8 double-digit win shares in league history, the other 2 being Wilt Chamberlain. In 1957, the starting 5 of the Boston Celtics finished top 7 in defensive win shares, with 4 of the 5 in the top 5 of defensive win shares. To give you some perspective, only Bob Cousy made the top 20 in defensive win shares the season prior. Bob Cousy, in 1956, had 2.6 defensive win shares, which tied him 15th league-wide. In 1957, he finished runner-up to Maurice Lucas for leading the league in defensive win shares with 4.7, just 0.1 more than Bill Russell, who had 4.6. For some perspective there, Bill Russell only managed 48 games. Bob Cousy played 64. In 1969, Boston had 4 of their starting 5 in the top 10 for defensive win shares, with all 5 of them, of the starting 5 that is, in the top 20. The following season, in 1970, only John Havlicek would make the top 20, finishing 9th, despite the fact that Bill Russell was the only starter from 1969 that retired. Russell in his debut had 6 teammates join him in the defensive win share top 20. Russell in his last season had 4 other teammates join him in the top 20 for defensive win shares. In the season before and the season after Russell's career, only one player in each season from the Celtics would make the top 20 for defensive win shares. What I'm trying to get at here is Bill Russell was the anchor for that defense, and his dominance on defense was so far ahead that you would argue it's almost unparalleled on one side of the ball ever. Just to give you more perspective, teammates to make the top 20 in defensive win shares with Bill Russell. With Bill Russell, there were 65 appearances by teammates in the top 20, 49 appearances in the top 10, 24 appearances in the top 5, 13 in the top 3 for defensive win shares league-wide. Those players, Sam Jones 9 times and Tom Heinsohn 9 times. KC Jones, Bob Cousy and John Havlicek 7 times. Tom Sanders and Frank Ramsey 6 times. Bill Sharman 4 times, 3 times to Bailey Howe, 2 times to Willie Knowles, Jim Luskatoff and Gene Conley, and 1 each to Larry Siegfried, Don Nelson, Lou Siaropoulos, Andy Phillip and Jack Nichols. For those of you that say Bill Russell had a lot of help, please remember that the defensive impact he had on the ball and gave some of these guys, honest to God, put a lot of these guys in the Hall of Fame. But to give you an idea, without Bill Russell, his teammates combine, the same list of players almost combine, and these are guys that played without Bill Russell, combined for 16 appearances in the top 20 for defensive win shares. Bob Cousy twice, John Havlicek 6 times, Bailey Howe twice, 5 times to Andy Phillip, and 1 to Jack Nichols. And to give you more perspective, only John Havlicek would finish top 10 in defensive win shares without Russell. He did it 4 times, 3 times in the top 5. 20 players for Boston had a PER of 20 or greater while finishing top 20 in defensive win share. Bill Russell did it 4 times, Sam Jones did it twice. Again, Bill Russell, the only player in league history to finish top 5 in MVP voting without averaging 10 points per game. Did that in 1969. To give you an idea of Boston, just before and after Russell, their record in 1956 saw them 39 and 33. They were 6th in defensive rating, 6 out of 8. They were 8th in opposing points per game, i.e. they were pretty much the worst defense in the league, running at the best pace they could. The following season with Bill Russell, they went 44 and 28, despite the fact that he missed a considerable number of games, led them in defensive rating, improved them to the 5th in opposing points per game, and still kept their pace. In his final season, they went 48 and 34, led the league in defensive rating. They were 2nd in opposing points per game, 5th in pace out of 14 teams. The following season, with Bill Russell being the only starter to retire, mind you, they dropped to 34 and 48, 8th in defensive rating and 7th in opposing points per game while keeping their pace. Something tells me Bill Russell was a big factor in those numbers. The 1969 Celtics were the only team, along with the 98 Chicago Bulls, not to make the playoffs the season after winning the NBA championship. Now, obviously, the Bulls lost Jordan, they lost Scotty, and they dismantled their team. Bill Russell, although Sam Jones retired, Bill Russell was the only starter to not return in 1970. Bill Russell missed a total of 52 regular season games through his career for the Celtics. Celtics' record in those games were 26 and 26. If you do not include his rookie season, in which the Celtics went 16 and 8 in their first 24 games, that record drops to 10 and 18. And if you look at teams during their 8-peat, the Celtics went 6 and 12 without Bill Russell. In 963 career games, regular season, Russell only ever recorded single-digit rebounds on 16 occasions. In 165 career playoff games, Bill Russell only ever recorded single-digit rebounds in one of them. Yes, that's right. In 164 of a possible 165 career playoff games, Bill Russell had one single-digit rebound game. In 963 career regular season games, only 28 of them are unaccounted on rebound numbers. Boston, at no point in Russell's career, actually had more All-Stars than any other team in a season, despite the fact and the narrative that is pushed by the media. At no point did they singularly outrank any other team in the league for All-Stars. Now, if you want to argue quality of those All-Stars, then there might be an argument. They did not actually have more All-Star players than any other team in Russell's time. And then if we want to continue, in 11 of Russell's 13 seasons, the team had 3 All-Stars. Now, just to give you some perspective, this was a league where most teams had 3 All-Stars. Some even had 4. So just to give you a bit more perspective on that one there.